Hi, I'm Maria. I'm here with Ken.
What's your last name?
My name is Maria Nodolf.
No.
Dolph.
How do you spell it?
Nodolf.
Oh, Nograf.
Like no
Haven't heard that name around. Do you live in Orangevale?
I do. I live on Cherry Avenue. So, Mr. Call, we're here to interview you for the Orangevale History Project. And we understand that even though you weren't a resident of Orangevale, you did attend some Orangevale schools. So we wanted to talk to you about that and your memories of Orangevale. First of all, what year were you born?
1924. Or wait a minute. Yeah, 1924. January 14th.
And where were you born?
Ogden, Utah.
Oh. Okay, and what brought you to California?
My father, because he wanted to eat oranges, and we lived in Wyoming. He spent 40 years there. And he used to come down here every once in a while. I don't know how he got mixed up with the people here in California, but he would come down, bring people down, and he told about eating oranges in December. And so we moved here in September of 1935. 35? Wait a minute. No. 1929, we moved to Thermalands, and you don't know where that is. You know where Camp Far West is?
Yes.
That's Thermalands.
Okay.
Thermalands was just getting started then. There's no town there. Still, we went to Lincoln all the time. But we built a house there and lived there only only 2 or 3 years. And I went to school there in Thermalands. It's called Valley View School. It's still there. We used to go swimming in Bear River and Coon Creek. If you go over Coon Creek when you go to Marysville out of Lincoln, a little bit. We went further up in there with the Indian. There was Indian graves there and everything. I don't know.
Wow.
Are you recording this?
Yes.
And I was too little there. I couldn't. We came down here and we landed here in Thermalands in September 1929, and I couldn't talk plain. I lisped. So I didn't start school until I was almost 7. I stayed home in 1929 and was it 30 until I was almost 7. I was 6, and then I started school. But I only went to school 7 years.
So tell us how you ended up at Roberts Elementary, the original Roberts.
Okay. We lived there in Thermalands. I went to, 3 grades because I had made 2nd and 3rd in 1 year. So we moved down here in 1930, I guess. We lived at the corner of Fair Oaks Boulevard and Greenback Lane in an old ranch house, probably built about 1870 or something. Big old 2-story house, 3-story, 2-story. Made in 1870 probably. You know where the cemetery is there?
Yes.
There was an old barn there, and I used to play in that as a young boy. That was all one ranch at one time, I guess. And then they made Greenback Lane. And somebody used to tell me the reason it's called Greenback is because this was 1870 or something, or whenever it was. And the Chinaman that worked on it wanted to be paid in greenback. So they called it Greenback Lane. But I went to Sylvan School. It was just 1 mile from my house there at the corner of Greenback and Fair Oaks Boulevard to Roberts School up there. It had 2 schoolrooms, but we only had 1 teacher there, and we only used 1 schoolroom. It must have said at one time they were going to do it. And right by Roberts School, his dad built a house for somebody there, $900 for the whole house. Probably just a little 2-bedroom home. It's still there, but it's enlarged a lot. Anyway, and we stayed in Thermalands for a couple of years, and then, let's see, 29, 30. I made second and third in 1 year and so when I got to Kenneth School, Kenneth Avenue, I was put in the 4th grade. I made second and third in 1 year. So I was in the 4th grade, and I only went there till the 8th grade, and then I went to San Juan High School and 4 years there.
So could you tell us who are the teachers you remember from Roberts Elementary?
Mrs. Kirsten, Kirsten. Now, you want a name like, I'm trying to take Tomich. He sells, you might see his sign, he sells peaches and stuff. Now, they know more about Orangevale than I do.
We've talked to them.
Have you?
Yes.
Well, they're the ones that can tell you more about Orangevale. But we lived at the corner of Greenback Lane and Fair Oaks Boulevard, that big old ranch house. And then, well, I know why it caught on fire, but I won't say it.
We know why.
This house burned down.
Yeah.
Very suspicious circumstances to us. And so we lived it. So my dad made a kind of a little, well, just a roof like that with about this much open underneath, and us kids slept in that. He had a kind of a little shop that he could move around. It was about 8 feet long and about 10 feet long and 8 foot wide or something. He could put on a big truck. He was a carpenter.
You're saying your house burnt down.
And our house burned down, and we moved under an oak tree on that piece of ground down there.
Uh-huh.
And he built a shed, just an A-frame place for us boys, us kids to sleep in. And they slept in a little room about 8 feet by 10 feet. That he had he would move it to where he was working, building a house to keep his stuff in. And him and Mom slept in that. We bathed in a wash tub, of course. And anyway.
Do you remember anything else about Roberts School?
When I went there, I was in the 4th grade. They put me in the 4th grade. I made the second and third in 1 year at Valley View School in Thermalands. So they put me in the 4th grade, and I was a smart little kid. I've read books all my life, still reading them. And so I only went 7 years to grammar school. All my sisters and brothers did. We were all smart. I grew up with books. This book right here, they're the World Book. We had Book of Knowledge in those days, and I'd sit and read those and pour through them as a little kid. Anyway, I grew up read many a book with a kerosene lamp, and then we moved when our house burned down. We lived there on the ground for a little while. We moved to Orangevale, Kenneth Avenue, and Phoenix. If you go to go up Greenback, turn right on Kenneth Avenue, and go down. Steinwan's had a big turkey farm in there. Elwin Steinwan, John Steinwan. His dad raised turkeys, and he was my best friend for many years. In fact, even him and I got married to women. He married a girl from, no, I was going to say Germany. He went to Germany. We were both in the war about the same time. He was in tanks, and I was in airplanes.
So what was his name again?
His name was John Steinwan.
Steinwan.
And it's spelled with a T on the end. W-A-N-D-T. And he raised turkeys there.
And was that Elvin who raised the turkeys or John?
His dad raised turkeys, and he did too.
Okay, they both did. Okay.
After the war. And he went to Germany in tanks. And I stayed home and learned how to fly, and we were just ready to. I was supposed to be a fighter pilot, and there's another story. When I went to Monterey to get in the service, 1943, I was 19. I went in, and I was going to be a fighter pilot. And have you ever seen a colorblind chart with bunch of numbers like this with numbers in them, dot. And I said the wrong number, and he said, "You can't be a fighter pilot. You're colorblind." So they stuck me in the Signal Corps, attached to the Air Force, sent me to Texas to learn Morse code and stuff, be a radio operator. And I went to another base there in Texas. I'm trying to think, no, Corsicana, maybe. Anyway, I went to another Air Force base, passed the colorblind test, and got into cadets. And my whole life was changed because of that. So they were trying to make me, I was in Texas learning that, but then I got into cadets, and I went to different places, and I went to Keesler Field, Mississippi. Then they sent us to Knoxville, Tennessee. They sent me to 3 months. If I'd been dumber, I'd have gone 6 months, which is good duty, but I made too good a grades, and so I only sat by there 3 months. But then they gave us little orientation flights. It was went to Knoxville, Tennessee College. Some of us cadets did that. And I used to fly over the river there, and I'd say, "What's all that yellow mud out there?" And a big, long building. And they said, "Oh, it's just a defense plant of some sort." So I said, okay. It was the Manhattan Project, making uranium for the bomb. But anyway, so that was a good duty. Then I went to Corsicana, went to Arkansas for a while. Then I went to, I finally got into cadets, went to Alabama. I went to Alabama, and then I went to Camden, South Carolina, to learn to fly. That was the first time I learned to fly. And that was, you know what a Stearman is, a PT-17? That was the first plane I flew in. Ground looping son of a gun. The wing was about this, biplane, had a wing about this low off the ground, and they take a dim view of you scraping the wing on the runway. And one time I ran off the runway, so I wouldn't do it because I landed in a crab a little bit, and they let us scrape the wings. Anyway, I learned to fly there. That was in Camden, South Carolina. Then they sent me to Bainbridge, Georgia. And that's where I met my wife, Jackie. They were the only Mormon family in Bainbridge, Georgia. And so I went to church with them. We had to drive up to Dothan, Alabama, 50 miles away. And we spent the afternoon together. She was an identical twin, her and her twin Jeannie. And anyway, when she went to bed that night, she told her sister, she says, "I'm going to marry him." And they moved to Salt Lake in 1945. And I waited for her to get through high school. And 4 days out of high school, we got married. I had her for 70 years. And good married, had 5 kids. She lived with me in this house. We lived in first we lived on a house that I built in Sylvan Corners, that I built, and we lived there. And then in 50, they called me back in, and I got to fly P-51s. Do you know what P-51s are? Oh, beautiful little plane. The best propeller-driven fighter in World War II. It could outfly a German 109 and any of those things that was good. But I didn't fly it until 1950. I flew for a radar school down there. Then, let's see, where did I go? Oh, from Bainbridge. I went to, when did I go? I went to Alabama. Anyway, I finally got my wings in Dothan, Alabama. I became an officer, second lieutenant, and instead of putting us into fighters, though, they put us into B-29s. They needed B-29 people because they had just made the bomber then. We hated it. I became an engineer on B-29s, sitting at a big panel of instruments, checking the RPMs and transferring fuel around to the different tanks and everything like that. I sat behind the pilots in a little cubbyhole. And Did that, but never did go overseas. Flew 15 hours one night over the Atlantic Ocean. Remember a big long flight we had there. But the war ended before I went overseas. And then I came home and I built a house there on Community Drive in Citrus Heights. We lived there. And then in 50 they called me in again. And I flew for a radar school down in Florida in 1950 to 51. And then they transferred me to Lowry Field at Denver. And I flew there for a while. I test airplanes when they'd worked on them a little bit, see they was okay. Had an assistant commissary officer. And then we got out, and I had my family there with me. And then in 1952, we bought a house in North Highlands, brand new house. We lived there till we moved into this house we sold that house and moved here in Christmas of 61 and been here ever since.
So,
but I went back to work at McClellan.
Okay. Did you, you said that your friend was Steinwald. Did you remember anybody else from
Robert School?
Yes, from Robert's school. Did you
John
know that?
Steinwald, yes, there was Inez Hill. She was a pretty girl. In fact, I saw her a couple of years ago up there in Orangevale at some eating place there. But she was older than I was. I was in the 4th grade. I only went there 2 years, 4th and 5th grade. Then we moved to Sylvan Corners, and I went to 6th and 7th and 8th there in Sylvan Corners. Then I went to San Juan High School and graduated.
Did you have another teacher other than Mrs. Kirsten?
No. She was the only one that was there. They had 2 rooms there with a 2-room building, but they only used 1 room that we had for schooling. But I read books. I was the only one in the 1st grade then, or 2nd grade or something. But I've read hundreds of books in my life, and I did good in that. And I used to help her correct the younger kids' books. But I read there, and I went to 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grade. I don't think 5th. I went to Sylvan School here. We moved here on Sylvan Community, and I went to Sylvan School, and in the 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. Then I went to San Juan High School 4 more grades.
Did you know the Tomich brothers?
Did I know what?
The Tomich brothers?
No, they didn't go to. How about Menzer? Martinez? No, not Martinez. Philip. I knew that a few days ago. And it started with an M.
Mendoza?
He worked at a hardware store in later years there in Folsom. Philip. I don't remember that. It started with an M. It was like wasn't Mendoza. Why can't I remember his name? I'm 98 and a half.
Maybe it'll come to you.
But Philip wasn't Martinez. He wasn't even Spanish. I don't know what he was. Anyway, Inez Hill was another lady that was there, and she might still live in Orangevale. She was older than I was, but she's a beautiful girl. She married Vandevaarts. They lived there. Jean Vandevaart was older than I was. His sister, Nada Vandevaart, was my age. I think she's still alive down in Sebastopol. I talked with her not too long ago. Then we moved. We lived in Orangevale for a while after our house burned down at Sylvan Corners. Then we moved to Roseville, but we still went to school here. We had a cow out in Sylvan, and we'd have to come out and milk there. So Dad brought us to school. And then he'd pick us up at evening when we came to, and we lived in Roseville. Even though we lived in Roseville on B Street, 222 B Street, we lived there, I guess, for a year. Well, we lived there from because my sister's daughter died. She was married, and her daughter Betty Bullard died. She was 10 months old. She's buried at Sylvan's Corners, Sylvan Cemetery. Mom and Dad there buried. My brother and his wife are buried there. I'm gonna be buried down in the military graveyard in Fairfield, Dixon, really. My wife's buried down there. They got her there in the day, and the gravestone. Now it says Jackie Call, wife of Major James D. Call, and they'll just turn around, and I'll be the front, and she'll be on the back, be in the same grave down at Dixon. So I'm kind of looking forward to dying. I'm just lucky. I drive my car all over and get wood from a fireplace and chop it up if I have to, or saw it up. And my daughter calls me a mutant. She says, "Dad, you're the healthiest person I've ever seen in my life." If I run this thumb, forget which thumb it was, kind of through my bench saw, the corner like this. I said, old Jim Call for his bathroom wall was pushing the board through a saw. He hollered how dumb looking around for his thumb because it was almost gone from his paw. I remember going to the hospital, and the nurse, this was during the time they were scared about herpes or something. I said, "You don't have to worry about me. I've never smoked in my life or anything." And they fixed my thumb for me, and it was okay. It wasn't too bad. Anyway, I've been healthy all my life. I'm 98 and a half. I don't really want to live to be 100, but I just talked to a friend today that lives in Salt Lake City. He said, "Jim, I want you to live to be 100. Dad was a few months less than 100. No, wait a minute. He died from April 29th, he was born in 77, and he was a few months less than 98 when he died, and I'm 98 and a half right now. I'm probably going to live to be 100. I don't really want to. I'm ready to die. I tell the Lord, when he whistles, I'll come running. So I'm ready to die anytime. But I've got 4 girls that are angels, and one lives in Stockton. The other one lives a half a mile away, not even a half a mile, a quarter of a mile away, and the other 2 live in the end over on the other Roseville, West Roseville. But I talk to them every day, and they watch over me and stuff. So I get along fine, but...
Well, you know that the original Robert School also burned down. Do you remember how long after you left that happened?
I think it burned down during the war, didn't it? During World War III, II?
I'm not sure.
I think it was, because I think it was... Well, now, wait a minute. I don't know when it burned down. It might have burned down during the war, though, or after the war. I don't think it was there, because I left there when I was in the 4th grade, or the 5th grade, because I went, I guess, the 6th and 7th and 8th grade at Sylvan School over here. So it didn't stay burned very long. In fact, I don't know. And maybe just half of it burned down, because they built the second half. Maybe just a part of it burned down. I don't remember. I was gone. It was during the war or something. But I don't... We used to shop at... well, in Orangevale. Might have been called Moody's. There was a store up on the right side of the street, kind of on the top of a hill. Was it before we got to Orangevale or after? Must have been after. It was just after Orangevale. Anyway, we were there when they built the dam up in Holston Lake. But I lived there when I went into service in January 1943, a house burned in 1932, I think. And then we lived in kind of Fair Oaks Boulevard and we lived on Phoenix Avenue in Orangevale. And then we lived in Roseville while we were building a house there in Community Drive. And we built that. Took us a couple of years to build that. But then I grew up in Citrus Heights. Well, I only went to the 6th and 7th and 8th grades at Sylvan School.
So 4th and 5th at Roberts with Mrs. Kirsten.
4th and 5th. Well, let's see. Yeah, the 4th and 5th. Yeah, the 4th and 5th in Roberts School.
All right.
Because 6th grade and 7th grade I was in Sylvan.
Do you have any other memories of Roberts School or Orangevale or?
I don't remember much about Orangevale. I know that we lived, after our house burned down, we lived under a tree, and Dad had this little cabin that he had built to fall around when he was building houses somewhere. And him and Dad, that Mom slept with us, and we had a shop on that land. We had 70 acres there, and he had a shop there with a tin roof on it, and he took some of those tin roofs and made us an A-frame type of thing where us kids slept in a building there, and the tree's still there we slept under. We had a floor under it, kind of, and we slept there for, I'll tell you, the house burned down in 1932, I think, and we lived there for at least a couple of years. Then we moved to Roseville, and then we built a house in Community Drive, and we lived there. Then I went in service in 1943, and I lived in North Highlands when I came home. Then I moved here and been here ever since.
Well, an interesting story.
Well, I wanted to be a fighter pilot, and they told me I was colorblind. Dumb. I don't. So I went to. So they made a radio operator out of me. I went to Tyler, Texas, good place, and I was going to radio school there. And I went over to, I believe it's called Corsicana, Texas, a little town where had an Air Force base, and I took the test all over again and passed it. So they stuck me in. They didn't send me anywhere back this way. Some of the guys went here and ended up radio operator somewhere on a plane somewhere. I went to Alabama. No, I went to Missouri back. Then I went to Knoxville, Tennessee to college for 6 months. Then I went to Arkansas for 6 months, waiting to get into a flying school. Then I went to Alabama. Then I went to, that was the ground school for cadets, and then I went to Camden, South Carolina, World Civil War house place. I learned to fly that a PT-17. The wing, the biplane, it was about this far off the ground, and if you come in a little bit of a crab, that wing was going to hit the ground. And one time I did come in a little, but before it hit the ground, I righted it and turned around so I didn't scrape it. We did run off the runway, but I didn't scrape the wing. So that was okay. Then I went to Bainbridge, Georgia. My wife they were the only Mormon families in Bainbridge, Georgia. And so I found them, and I went to church with them that first day. She was 10 days less than 15 years old. I was a 19-year-old cadet. And she told her sister, we spent the day together, and she says, I'm going to marry him. Well, they moved out to Salt Lake in 1950, and I kept seeing her go. I came home and kept going back and forth to see her, and 4 days out of high school for her, we've been married, and I had her for all those years until 1988. So I'm waiting to see her. See, in my religion, we were married in the temple, and we were sealed to each other. And I'll have her for the next life. I'll have her for eternity. She'll be my wife. And I'm waiting to see her. I'm sure she's up there patting her foot. We had a good marriage, and I bet she's saying, Donald, she called me Donald. I was James Donald, say, but I grew up as James. I grew up as Donald because I had an Uncle Jim back there in Wyoming. And so, but I came Jim first name in the Army, so she calls me James. But Jimmy, get up here. I've had you for 70 years. I am tired of being up here by myself. Although she's got a twin sister there with her, and her mother and her dad are there. And my folks are all there. My dad had 5 boys with his first wife, and 7 of us kids, and they're all up. I'm the only one alive out of the whole dadgum bunch. I don't know why I'm hanging around so long. But I'm built like my dad, and he was 98, almost 90. He was a month or two, no, oh yeah, April 29th he died, and in May of 18th he would have been 98, and I'm 98 and a half now. I'll be 99 next January. So anyway, I might live to be 100, but I'm tired of living by myself. I tell my kids, I said, if the church didn't take such a dim view of it, I'd want somebody to live with me, but I don't believe in that stuff. Grew up being in 3 wars, and I'm.
Do you have any hobbies?
Huh?
Do you have any hobbies?
I fix everything. I worked with my dad building houses, and that's the trouble. My yard's of a mess because I don't pick up everything, but I do woodwork, and I fix. I've never paid anybody to work on my cars. I've been able to change engines and repair engines and fix things, but I'm getting too old for doing that now. I've never paid anybody to do anything for me. I've done everything myself. I can build a house. I can fix the house. But I'm getting old. So, but I've had a good life. I lived with my wife for 70-some years. And like I say, the first day we went to church together, she told her twin sister, she says, I'm going to marry him. And I waited for her to get through 2 years to get through high school, and we got married 4 days after she graduated, and I had her for 80 years.
That's a lovely thing. That's a lovely thing.
I'm waiting to see her. We had my 5 kids. I got 4 girls that are angels. I got one boy that kind of grew up with the hippies, and he's not good as my girls are. I talk to him all the time. In fact, I talked with him yesterday, I guess. He lives down in San Diego. He writes books, and he was in Vietnam the same time I was. I was in Vietnam in '68, I think. I had people fixing airplanes at different bases in Vietnam and Thailand, and I had to go check on them. And I was stationed at Saigon for a while, and then I come home, and I've had a good life. I've been in this house since Christmas of '61.
Well, thank you for sharing with us. It's been a very interesting recollection.
I don't know what good to be. You weren't really Orangevale. We did go to shop at Orangevale some. Most of the time, well, Sylvan Corners had a grocery store. That's where we did our grocery buying, at Sylvan Corners, and I went to Sylvan School. Dad built a house at, it was called Biederman's, that the guy named Biederman. Do you know where this 12-mile house is down here on Highway? Mm-hmm. Well, practically across the street from it almost is a big building. We called it Biederman's, and Dad, it was like a honky-tonk hall there, the dance hall. They later became a dance, people taught dancing there. But Dad put a bar in that place, built a bar, for pretty mahogany bar. He used to sell gas for 10 cents a gallon there. But then we lived I built a house, and helped Dad build his house on Community Drive, a big, pretty white house now, steep roof, and I built a smaller house next door to it in 40. Yeah, I was married in '47, and we moved into that house. And then when I went into service in '50, then Dad sold it, and then I came back and bought a house in North Highlands. Then from North Highlands we moved to this house, and I've been here ever since.
Well, thank you.
Seen a lot of stuff. We used to from Kenneth Avenue we could coast all the way down to Fair Oaks Boulevard in an old Rio we had. I was there when they built the dam up there in Folsom, and Rocky Ridge used to go on out to, well, it does go out to the lake now.
Well, thank you.
I'm so lucky. I'm 98 and a half. I can watch TV. I can drive my car. I can read all my books. I can do my own shopping. I can walk around. I do kind of use a cane. I don't have to, but it kind of helps me, steadies me a little bit. So I'm just lucky, and I know they're up there saying that, Dad, get up here.